Thanks very much, and thanks for having me this afternoon here in Adelaide. It's a pleasure to be here. We love colour and we love lots of pink, by the way, so you'll be seeing a bit of that throughout this conversation. So, first of all, I thought I'd start by giving you a little bit of a story on the ODI, who we are, what our mission in life, I suppose, is. We're only 2 years old. We formed in December almost 2. We're part of a global network. There's about 30 of us in various cities and nations all around the world. We're the only Open Data Institute in Australia, and we are expanding into other states, and we're starting to have great impact outside of Queensland as well, although that's obviously where we started. Our name will eventually have to change. Our mission is to connect, inspire and equip people to innovate with data. We're a not-for-profit. We were founded with sponsorship by organisations all across the sectors of our economy, mostly in the private sector, you'll be interested to hear, universities, and research. We've got Telstra, Microsoft. I'll show you our partners in a moment. We're very much built on a community, as I mentioned, a community of our sponsors. So they're all of the organisations that got behind this initiative and helped us get going 2 years ago. Got a number of new partners there that have just joined us. In particular, Queensland Government has very recently entered into an open data partnership with the ODI, and it's just under $500,000 over 2 years, and we've got a number of responsibilities that will effectively see Queensland position itself to really lead the nation in terms of its maturity as a contributor of good quality public open data and as a consumer and user of that open data to create internal efficiency gains and public service delivery enhancements as well. The idea, obviously, at the end of the 2 years is we'll start to see new businesses and new industries emerge, enhanced public service delivery within Queensland Government and our local governments, greater civic participation in a far more transparent and accountable government. So that's the goals of our new relationship with the Queensland Government. I think it's always useful when having any open data conversation to start by clarifying, I suppose, where open data belongs in the broader data spectrum. So when we talk about open data, what we're really talking about is data that anyone can access, use and share. And it's pretty easy to remember that when you think about it. AUS here in Australia, access, use and share. That's certainly how I remember it. It must be accessible. It's generally got to be published on the web, available in a machine-readable format, have a licence that permits anyone to access, use and share, as I say. And it's that licence, it's the permissions that that open licence conveys that differentiates it from other data sets. Collect once, reuse many times, and it's the only resource, when you think about it, that actually increases in value the more it's reused and repurposed. Closed data, obviously at the very other end of the spectrum is data that doesn't have those permissions, those open permissions attached to it. Shared data is an interesting space, and it's a space I'm finding more and more that the research community is very comfortable in and has some work to go before we can sort of help get them into the open world. But shared data we would commonly deal with, say, for example, filling in an application for a credit card, you might see at the bottom of that your finance institution is actually asking your permission to share your data with someone else linked to that service provider to maybe give you advice on superannuation and other things. So there's lots of examples of where shared data exists. Shopping loyalty data is another one. We live a lot in the shared data space. Personal data doesn't always have to be closed. There are examples of open personal data, for example, salaries of elected representatives, identity of company directors, personal insolvency. I thought I'd also canvass while we're here, big data and linked data, so having some fun talking about data this afternoon. Big data is obviously data used to describe data that's in large quantities. It might be from rapidly changing, as in it's alive, and it might be collected from multiple sources. It can also be open data. So big data and open data often work together. For example, public transport live feeds of go-card data if you're in Queensland and the equivalent in other states. Linked data is kind of like the nirvana for us in the data spectrum. Linked data is a way of publishing data so that it can be easily linked automatically with other data sets. So if you think about it in the context of a road network, linked data is where it finds those intersections and junctions automatically and jumps on and grabs some of that other data where those identifiers are where the links and the junctions are. So I wanted to talk about this afternoon a couple of public consultation projects that we've been working on at the ODI. The first one was as part of our Open Data partnership with the Queensland Government, and the Queensland Government is developing an open data policy. Interestingly, it's a greenfield policy site. For Queensland, we don't have an open data policy there, and so we've been charged with the responsibility of helping to ensure that that policy is going to meet the realistic expectations and demands of all Queenslanders across all sort of sectors and out into the regions as well. So we developed the name of this project, and we were briefed to make it innovative. So have an innovative approach was basically what we were told by the Queensland Government to the policy consultation. So we thought, well, let's try and eliminate some geographical boundaries, so we'll make this easy for people in far north Queensland and remote areas of Queensland, outside of Queensland, people outside of the country, to participate and contribute to the conversation. We will eliminate barriers in terms of technological capability by making some sort of levels of this really easy to participate in, and we'll try and get as wide a possible connection to, we'll get the widest audience connected as possible. And because ODI we're not subject matter experts in this space by any stretch, we engaged one of our partners, Articulus Communications, to do this for us and will help us. I'll share with you a couple of the methodologies that we utilised in that program in a second. But I just wanted to also flag in that context, last week I was talking to a bunch of researchers at the eResearch conference, and the topic they asked me to speak about was demonstrating quality and building trust in open data. And I think that's really, it was timely, because they were the two key topics that emerged throughout our open data, open conversations. Quality in the sense of we're talking quality, reusable, reliable open data, and building trust in terms of that usability and reliability, being able to trust that data, but also being able to have public confidence that the preservation of privacy had been maintained in those data sets. So what we did for open data conversations was a three-pronged attack, basically. We created... we also did a video that was, I'm not going to show it to you now, but it's a nice, simple video that just explains the concept, explains what we were trying to get out of people in terms of their contribution, the ways that they could participate, and why there were so many different ways for them to participate. This we don't think's been done before. This is our social map, but it wasn't obviously linked to a location-based map. It was a concepts map or a themes map, and these were the themes for the policy. So what we got, this was our entry-level tool, and we got the thumbs up and thumbs down. Obviously, you guys will be familiar with this kind of thing. It was really just to enable people to have a little bit of fun and also share their thoughts and feedback. You can click on each of the thumbs and thumbs up, thumbs down, which identified opportunities and challenges, but you could also have transparency and openness in what those comments were. You can make comments on those comments, and really more importantly for us, for our reporting, we collected a whole lot of data around the postcode, the sector that they considered themselves aligned to, and some of their contact details, so we can actually now present back to Queensland Government how broadly our consultation actually was. Then we had a more sophisticated online mechanism, which was this community forum, which we'd been meaning to do anyway, because at the beginning of the year, we had a forum, we got all of our community together and we said, how are we going to keep engaging? What do you guys want to do most? And they said, well, we'd love to have a really good discussion forum. So I didn't really know which one to use, so we kind of researched around and we found this one using Discourse. We pre-populated it. It was just for our project. We pre-populated it with a whole lot of discussion themes, again, not dissimilar to the social map. So there were things about quality of data, timeliness of data, engagement with the custodian of the data and things like that. And again, we've done the same. That was just the header. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. There's probably about 200 people in the end we got participating in that. And what we did at the end, again, we've collected all of the data from them about their postcode, their sector, etc. So we can start to provide some meaningful reporting back to Queensland Government and help them understand who's actually participating in this. What I don't know yet, and what would be really interesting to find out, is whether people used all three mechanisms or whether they just used one or the other, and just to sort of see how that planning really panned out in a realistic sense. The third thing we did, we had the face-to-face stuff. So we had these deep dive workshops. We had 4 of them. They were half-day sessions, and every single one was separated by clusters according to sectors, because we just couldn't fit that many people at ODI's place. Our capacity was about 50, so we aimed to have 50 in each workshop. We got about, I don't know, some were 40, maybe a couple were a bit less than that. We kicked off each session, so Articulus Communications drove the facilitation of these, and we kicked off each one with live polling, which was great because it was anonymous, and in open data there are a lot of elephants in the room that people are really uncomfortable talking about, like privacy and sensitive data and how we manage unintended consequences and things like that. So it was great to be able to have that stuff called out anonymously. All the elephants in the room were there for everyone to talk about. So immediately it set this lovely open tone for the rest of the conversation. And it was just, it was fantastic. Got great feedback. We started with experience sharing to really get that what's going on in your world when you try to use data, what's going on in your world when you try to publish, what's really holding you back, what are the real problems. And so it was a fantastic way to really get an intensive in what's going on and holding people back, or what they've found to be solutions. So we started building those solutions, and then we started doing some scenario testing, because it is a policy that we're endeavouring to help the Queensland Government develop. So interestingly, some of the sectors had different perspectives. They had different energy depending on who they were. Probably our standout crowd was the public sector guys, which was fantastic to see. Lots of different state government departments were represented, lots of different local governments were represented, and they were all quite sympathetic to each other, and it got heated. There was great arguments and chocolates flung around the room, and it was fantastic. And then we had one for business and startups. That was a different energy altogether. Then we had the spatial community and not-for-profits, and they really surprised me and were very engaged and fantastic. Then we had our researchers and academics, and researchers are a really interesting group because we haven't probably I don't feel, embraced them enough on the open data journey. We've been letting them be in that shared zone, and it's difficult because their model isn't set up for open. It's set up really well for sharing. So that was a really challenging conversation in some of those areas as well. But really, at the end of the day, this is what everybody had to say. Open data is still too hard to find, access and use. Strong demand for improving metadata to determine fitness for purpose, context of the data, the sustainability of that data set. If I rely on this data set, if I go and mortgage my house to create a new business that's going to be serving up this app to people, is it going to be a reliable data set? Is the Department of Transport just going to change that data at the drop of a hat, or not publish it anymore? So they're the sorts of things that are really important to people that are consuming data. There were calls for greater consistency with standards and formats. I imagine you would find that not exactly hard to believe, and really, really strong interest in much greater engagement. And that was engagement between publishers and consumers. And I think that we have often been under a bit of a misconception, publishers and contributors of open data, that people that are consuming the data that we publish, the data that we allow people to reuse and repurpose, they don't want us to know because, you know, that's the whole point of open data. But in fact, they generally do, and they would prefer to engage with the custodians of those data sets so that they can find out, was there any additional data that you collected around this time? Were there additional columns, for example, to that Excel spreadsheet? So, plus it adds value to the custodian as well, because if people are using your data, how exciting is that to know, and how valuable that you can then go and understand what sort of things have got some value out there in the community. So that was a big standout for us. Second project, just briefly, I wanted to touch on is the Open Government Partnership. So the Open Government Partnership, I think you've already had a bit of a chat about this morning, was signed on to by the Australian Government in November last year. There are, I think, 69 nations now signed on to this around the world. There was a series of public consultation that kicked off here in December and concluded at a workshop in April. And obviously the purpose of the consultation was to design a national action plan. What are we going to do in order to progress our commitment to the Open Government Partnership? The National Action Plan is a 2-year document, and we're in the process of developing that now. If you were involved in the consultation around that, you would remember that there was probably about 10 commitments that were being tossed around at the workshop in April. They were ranging from open data, of course, but that's only one part of it. Transparency in terms of beneficial ownership of companies and whistleblower protection and all sorts of things like that. There was also some public participation commitments as well. So we've progressed. There's now an interim working group. There are 6 members of civic society, or 6 representatives of civic society on that group, and the rest are all obviously representatives of the Australian government. So that group got appointed in September. We've been working for the last couple of months now as quickly as one can work in a group like this. It's been pretty intense. We now have the commitments drafted. We're hoping to be able to share them for a round of public consultation soon. Is about the best I can tell you, and as soon as that is available, we'll have to be working really quickly to round that up, and we'll be hopefully getting a national action plan approved by the Prime Minister and over to Paris just in time for the summit. I think it's the 8th of December. So you see what I mean about working quickly. It's really hard to get all of these different opinions to align, but we're getting there, and it's a really great group, and it's been a really interesting experience. But we'll hopefully be in a position. There is a page on our website where I keep updates from sort of the interim working group as much as I'm allowed to, but the blog is usually the best place by the OGP team. So I meant to say as well at the beginning of this, I'm happy for you to interrupt me with questions as we go. I don't mind, and I'm more than happy to have open conversation as we go through. So just yell. If I can't see you, just yell, because it's a bit hard with the lights. So we've spoken about what we've identified through the experiences that we've had and the information gathering that we've been doing around open and open innovation, open data. This is something that the ODI has developed to help. So I wanted to touch on a couple of tools that you can take away from this session to consider about what can be done as a mature contributor of public open data. Or if you're private sector as well, there are many organisations that are in our community that are starting to publish and share open data for their own commercial purposes. So, a as I've got here, you can see there that there's two individuals involved, the fellows from the ODI in London, the fellow from the Department of Environment and Food and Rural Affairs, created this. It's built on sort of global best practice of data management. It's obviously got specific content around open data. And the purpose of this thing and this journey, I suppose, because they call it the Open Data, well, it's the Open Data Maturity Model, but it's a pathway, is to elevate your practice as a publisher and contributor of open data. Effectively, there's 3 stages. None of this would be surprising. You can't really go anywhere unless you baseline. So the first thing is to assess the organisation's approach, robustness, mature, publishing practice, data management. There's a whole lot of sort of process I'll just flick you through in a second. But obviously the purpose of this thing is to assess where we are. Where we are, it's a great place to start for anybody that's new to publishing open data. Great place to start for anyone who's been publishing open data but wants to start measuring and having some sort of tangible way of assessing their progress. So this obviously starts with what's your weaknesses and strengths. There's 83 questions. I'll take you through the themes in a sec. Then it helps you, the tool itself is an open source, freely available tool, and I've got a link to it in my slides that will be made available to you guys. The second thing it helps you do is set some targets. Where do you want to go? So we've done where we are. Don't worry if it's really bad. No one's ever done a perfect score in this, ever. The second one is helps you set some target, where do you want to go? And then there's an action plan, how are we going to get there? So it's all pretty logical stuff. They're the 5 themes. Again, as I say, it's built on a number of different frameworks, so some of these would probably look quite familiar. There's 15 activities in each of the different themes. And I guess not surprisingly, they're a little bit aligned to some of those areas that we were looking at with the open data policy for Queensland Government. So there's all of those different things. There's 83 questions, and what happened was we ended up in Queensland developing a service around this. So what triggered it was there were 2 ladies in the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries who sit next to each other, and they did the 83 questions, and they came up with radically different scores. And they said, oh, this is really hard because they didn't really understand sometimes what the questions meant or how to rate themselves. So we thought, how about we develop a mechanism where we can actually guide you through the questions, you get consistency, you can start to baseline or you start to benchmark yourself against others, you're comparing apples with apples, and help make this a little bit easier. So we've developed a service in Queensland. We've taken it outside of Queensland now. We've just done our first one in New South Wales with the Office of Environment and Heritage. We've done the Department of Science, Innovation and IT in Queensland, Agriculture and Fisheries, State Library, a whole bunch of different ones in Queensland, and we're hopefully going to be starting to create Queensland Government want us to create a public sort of like a scoreboard or a leaderboard where we're actually starting to report on and see progress by all of the different state government agencies. And local councils want to get on board with that as well and start making their progress open. The Department of Transport and Main Roads did their own, and they've also published their scores as an open data set on the Queensland Government Open Data Portal. So that's pretty out there, it's pretty open, which is absolutely fantastic to see. So there's 5 stages, lots of workshops, and really the most, I think, beneficial thing that the participants get out of these workshops is that you're bringing together a bunch of people that aren't necessarily open data champions in the organisation. So it fosters these wonderful conversations about how we value data, our data literacy skills, how we ourselves take advantage of the data that we've got. And so lots and lots of anecdotal stories of benefits have emerged through those things that we do. So that's those. We did our final stakeholder presentation yesterday to the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, and they got a lot of benefit out of that conversation because what it did is it helped the top-down leadership. So we presented to their Board of Management. They asked a lot of questions, which we thought was a good thing, and it certainly is now going to set them on a much clearer path with their senior management, they've got a lot more visibility of what the open data champions in the organisation have done and where they're trying to go and what they're trying to achieve and why we're all bothering doing this and what the benefits are. The other tool, another free open source tool that I wanted to alert you to is the Open Data Certificates. So Open Data Certificates, just got to find where I'm up to here. I've lost my way. Open Data Certificates are quite different to the Open Data Maturity model and the Open Data Maturity pathway. The pathway is about your organisation and the maturity of the publishing practice or data management practice of the organisation. Open data certificates are actually about demonstrating or building trust, building public trust in the data that's been published. So I won't go through the sort of 5 stars of open data. It's not entirely based on the 5 stars, but Sir Tim Berners-Lee's 5 stars of data is the sort of original foundation for that. Okay, so these are open data certificates. You can earn them on data that's been published. Interestingly, state government in South Australia has more open data certificates than anyone in the world, I think. But we are about to implement an automated process for that so that we will be able to apply the software to the open data portals. It'll go through the metadata and it will automatically award certificates so that if you're going to start using and consuming open data, you can immediately see that a certain robustness of publishing practice has gone on. It does have an open licence, as we talked about before. You've been given the appropriate permissions to use it, or if there are restrictions, then at least it's really going to be available and plain for you to see. So the other thing I thought I'd share with you is a guide, another tool, another resource, freely available thing that the ODI has created to help those who are trying to bring about change within their organisation, particularly around an open data initiative. And I don't think this is specific to public sector, even though it's called Open Data in Government and How to Bring About Change. It's actually got some equally applicable advice and guidance for any organisation that's attempting to drive change through an open data initiative. So obviously they've sort of come up with about 12 recommendations to give you some guidance. It's pretty self-explanatory, sorry. But in terms of the first one, and this is usually the case with any open conversation anyway, is speak in terms of a problem that data could solve or a benefit that you wish to bring about. And this is going to help people connect with that idea and that vision. Obviously, it goes without saying, if you don't have support from leadership, nothing's going to happen. So that's a really critical thing to do. But don't forget those open data champions at the engine room either, and help them to see value in the data that they collect and what the opportunity is for themselves or for others to do with that data. Open communication mechanisms is something I'm sure you're well familiar with. This can be as simple as using social media to probe for feedback on your data or the information that you're publishing. Communicate with your with the public about new releases of data or updates of data. Form an advisory group. Get some external people involved and have these conversations with them. Said about some quick wins. Everybody loves to be part of a winning team. So if you're constantly shouting about great little things that you've been able to achieve, you'll soon find that the momentum obviously builds around that and link those to those long-term goals. And if you've matched this with something like the Open Data Maturity Model, then you've got a lot of clarity around what those long-term goals are and how you're able to link those with your quick wins. Don't forget to mentor others around you, not just in your own team, but other departments or other organisations, and sort of lead by example as well. There's lots and lots of ideas here, so I won't go through all of them, but the point of flagging this one with you this afternoon was just to sort of say, look, there's lots of help out there, there's lots of materials on our website, on the ODI's website, give you ideas on how to do these sorts of things. I think fostering external support from industry, academia and the community is an interesting one. I think the idea is there, it just keeps driving that political momentum, to gain that leadership support. And metrics for success. There's nothing better than being able to demonstrate your progress with actual facts. So there's a whole bunch of links and things for learning a bit more about Open, really easy training modules that are all free on our website. They go from what's open data through, I've highlighted 3 of them there, but there's actually 13 that you can do. I sat down one rainy day and did them all in 90 minutes. They're really quick, and it's a fantastic training tool. And what I'm finding a lot of organisations are doing is they're having little lunch and learns on Friday afternoon with the internal teams, and they're using these resources because they're great. The video goes for 2 minutes, and then there's a whole bunch of slides that you can work through together, and they're fun and they're bright and they're great. I can show you in a minute if we've got some time, and then they've got little quizzes and questionnaires and things. It's just a lovely way to sort of bring people on board and help them understand what this opportunity really means. Where to find data was an answer. It's a workaround. It's a hack. So what we did was we found it was really, really tricky to find open data. There's no Google for open data. You can't just search somewhere, and although it's starting to happen, find where publishers are putting their data. You've got hundreds of councils, lots of different state governments, universities. Everyone's publishing in their own way on their own portals, and there's some sort of we're starting to see some federation of portal catalogues, but it's still not really very easy. So we just did a full list on our website. So every single contributor of data in Australia is on there. And if there's anyone we've missed, please tell me, because we want to keep that up to date. But yeah, so that's a really great way to just go and see who's publishing, where are they publishing, what kind of platforms are they using. If you're looking for advice on what kind of platforms are out there, we've identified all of that stuff as well. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting things if you're working with data a lot. There's some really great open source tools that we've linked to there as well. Things like CSV lint, which will get into a CSV file and clean up errors, common errors and things like that. So if you're sort of working with data, you would find that that's a common frustration, and there's things there that you can use to help you. So the other thing I just wanted to link to there is our website, which is a place to sort of give you lots more advice and news and guidance and things like that. But now I think it's probably better if I can open up to some questions and prompt a bit of discussion. If anyone's got anything they want to ask me. I should have pre-canned some of these. Do you use open data? Okay. Whoops. Are there any publishers? Good girl. Excellent. Whereabouts are you from?
Logan City Council.
Oh, Logan, well done. That's lovely to have a fellow Queenslander here. Yeah, so you've got a couple of portals there at Logan, a spatial portal and your open data portal, which is also discoverable on the federal government portal as well. Are there, I think we had some people from Logan at the open conversations. Do you have any challenges or opportunities?
Thank you. We got involved in GovHack this year as well, which was the first time that Logan's been involved in that, and I was surprised by the number of people who turned up and the real age range and ability range there. So there was I think a preconception that was about technology, but it's actually about people.
Yes.
So it was great to see that actually happening with kids as young as 10 getting involved. And I can't remember what your question was, though.
No, well, I'm just happy to have a chat. So, but I think that is exactly right. It isn't about technology. It's not about IT. Open data often does rest in the IT area of an organisation, but it's about how we access knowledge. And I think it's great that GovHack this year encouraged kids. I think we really should be teaching data literacy in schools and how to tap into public data that's available to inform research at schools and things like that. So no, I thought Logan did an awesome job. Actually, just saying, Queensland did a really, really awesome job with GovHack this year. We had over 70 entries, and the nearest was the whole country of New Zealand on 60, and then there were a number of other sort of, in the 40s, other states. So it's good. It's good to see. Any other contributors? Publishers? Oh,
Hi. Hello.
Hello, thank you for saving me.
It's okay. My name's Gail Fairlam, and we haven't met before properly, but look, a while back, maybe 3 years ago, in my team, we started the first Unleashed here, which was part of GovHack. And you might be thinking, why did we do an open data hackathon as part of the work in open government and community engagement? And I think there is a very, well, not necessarily strong at the moment, but there is a link between sharing power with people and sharing use of assets. So open data is currently community data that is held in trust by government. Now, providing access to that data to community organisations, to people who can turn that data into either private or public value, is about government sharing its assets, and that sees us up the top end of the IAP2 spectrum. So I can see how the open data agenda fits quite well into the suite of tools and methodologies, and particularly as we move forward, decision making will be based on access to data, access to evidence, and we need to make that decision making, that sort of information available to communities, which is one of the reasons why we started the first hackathon here out of my team. So I just thought I'd give a bit of context, because it is one of the suite of methodologies. Hackathons share data and therefore share power with communities. Yeah,
and to take that further, it is even as well about those partnerships. I'll give you an example of a public organisation that went through a bit of an open data do we, don't we, how are we going to manage this sort of scenario, and the outcome for the public. So Transport for London, right back in sort of 2010 when the London data store was first getting started, were having a bit of a customer service crisis, and the feedback was that sort of, people were struggling with it. They were blaming the efficiency of the service, but realistically it was just a communication problem. People just weren't feeling that they had enough information to make proper decisions about how they travelled about the city and how they were efficient and effective in how they travelled about the city. So instead of developing in-house some sort of solution that would help people connect with that information, they published it as open data sets. They published, I think, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but I think it was around 62 data sets, and some of those were live feeds, but most of them were static data sets, which were easier for newbies to manage. As a publisher, within the first year they had something like 2,500 developers registered for those data sets. Those developers had created 362 apps, and they were reaching nearly 4 million people. So 4 million commuters around the City of London were accessing that data through these services. And so then they commissioned an economist to come and do a study. What's the value, the actual economic value of saving time, of being more efficient about how we move about the city, of being more efficient getting, to work, or what's the value of being home half an hour early and being able to actually see your kids once in a while. So they did this study. I think they commissioned Deloitte, and it was they ended up concluding after 2 years. So this was 2010, 2012. They did the study. Between 30 and 100 million was that value. I know it's hard to quantify, and a lot of it we're talking about is sort of less tangible stuff, but they're the sorts of impacts that just one example can have. Whole new industries are emerging. In the UK, which is one of the pioneers of open data, they've got these prop tech industries that are emerging because councils are making available their development data, their engineering data. And there's some simple things that can be achieved. So we're working in Australia on sharing borehole data. Now you might think, oh, well, you know, just go and get another borehole and test it. But that's expensive, and we're constantly collecting the same data all the time. But different private people are collecting it. We've got engineers doing it and soil experts doing it. Local councils are using their internal people to do it, and state governments are doing it as well. So we've got all of these different people testing the same thing over and over again. So we're starting to create a shared register. It's not, some of it will be open, most of it will be shared, because we're in this whole other realm where we're trying to work out how do we manage private data contributors and how do we reward them for contributing their data. Okay, maybe we just say those who contribute get to access it. So we're sort of exploring different models. But there's lots of really simple things that are starting to emerge now, that it's just about thinking about data differently, thinking about the fact that if we reuse it, collect once, reuse, repurpose. So I do like the Transport for London example. I think that it's good to sort of... there's a case study that the ODI have published on that one where they really were quite candid about their internal journey, and the CIO spoke quite freely about the risk that they took, they felt that they took in undertaking that project. And yes, it paid off, and they were really delighted in the end, but they also, the people in the case study also published information that they got off similar to an FOI request, which was they had attempted to develop something in-house, and they worked out what the cost of that was. So there was a lot of wastage of trying to develop something in-house, and then they went along the path of opening it up. So it even made the case study more compelling. But, yeah. So any other questions, comments, thoughts? All right, well, I think I might wrap that up then. So please jump onto our website, get on and access our tools. No? You want to ask a question? I'm not staying for much longer, so ask now. I've got to run back to Brizzy in about half an hour.
Oh no, that's all right. That last one you were just talking about with the case study, I was just curious to know where the community engagement kind of comes into it.
Yep.
So all the data's put out there, and you said that apps were developed and it's now reaching 4 million people, but does the community get involved with deciding whether it's their apps that they need or that they want?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about an open market. If it's appealing to people, they'll buy it. They'll vote with their, fingers. And I think that's also the really great thing about allowing the community to develop these apps rather than them trying to do it in-house, because how they would have to otherwise try and engage with the community to find out what sort of needs and decisions that they were trying to make, whereas this way the developers have just gone and created commercial solutions. Maybe some of them were free, I don't know, and servicing a much broader audience, because not everybody uses technology in the same way. So the great thing was they got 362 different ones to choose from. So I guess it's engagement in a kind of reverse sort of a way. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. I'm very pleased to have shared with you all of the progress we've been doing on open data, and I hope to hear from some of you down the track. If we can help any further, we'd be delighted to. Thanks for having us.